Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I'm doing the flip side of what we talked about this morning. Earlier today, I made a video talking about the Sacramento Kings choosing not to match the offer sheet that the Atlanta Hawks offered Bogdan Bogdanovic in restricted free agency, and now we're going to be talking about what this signing means for the Hawks and their overall roster here. I just talked about how I feel like the Hawks are significant winners this offseason in a video a few days ago, talking about how I like the Gallinari addition. I like the fact that they are prioritizing defense, especially in the backcourt, and they're adding depth throughout this roster. And now they're adding someone in Bogdanovic that is certainly a starting caliber player for them. And so now I kind of want to look at the roster overall, but also what this could potentially be pointing to, most specifically a potential John Collins trade that I feel like is pretty likely on the horizon at some point for this team. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day, and I will all throughout the NBA offseason. We're very close to 100,000 subscribers, so if you are interested in consistent NBA content, this is a great place to be. You can also leave a like rating on the video. Helps me out a ton, lets me know that you're enjoying the content, and gets the video out to more people on YouTube. And you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen and hang out with me outside of these videos here on YouTube. But with those things said, let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks. So quickly, I'm going to be a little bit repetitive here with some of the points that I made in the previous Hawks video in case some of you guys missed that. And then we'll talk about where I think this roster is going post Bogdanovic signing and then potentially how that impacts John Collins. So some of the points that I made quickly in that earlier Hawks video were that I felt like they were doing the correct thing in terms of adding depth, adding veterans, and not really handicapping themselves too much for the future, just building a solid lineup and one where you can actually start to see some progress here, where it's not just rebuild. They've got young players. They need to see who's good and who isn't. And in order to do that, you surround those players with actual real NBA guys, and then you kind of weed out who is and who isn't good. And you've still got assets as well to potentially trade for a big star down the road. And that was post Gallinari signing. And I talked about the possibility of them signing Bogdan Bogdanovic a handful of hours after I made that video. They sent in the offer sheet, and now Bogdanovic is on the Hawks after the Kings have now declined to match the offer. So for Bogdanovic specifically, I really like the fit on the offensive end of the floor because the Hawks have always had like such a rigid structure in terms of what their players can and can't do. They haven't had a ton of versatility, especially offensively, in their lineups. It was pretty much just Trae Young running the offense, everybody else being shooters off the ball or rim rollers. There wasn't a ton of other perimeter creation, and when it was, or when there was other perimeter creation, it wasn't very good or efficient, right? So it was pretty much all Trae Young and then everybody else. But now that they've added Gallinari and Bogdanovic as well, they've got multiple guys on the perimeter that can create offense for other people. Bogdanovic can be a really good on or off ball player. And on the offensive end of the court, I really like the fit. Now defensively, the Hawks are always going to have issues as long as Trae Young is, the guy that they're relying on offensively. Defensively, it's going to be an issue unless they're surrounding him with players that can defend really well. And unfortunately, as you're looking at this lineup, Bogdanovic and Gallinari are not exactly those type of guys, but they've drafted a handful of players in the past, guys like DeAndre Hunter and ideally Cam Reddish, that can be really good perimeter defenders, which makes me think that the mindset here, the idea is that they're going to groom one of those guys to be the starting three. You got Bogdanovic at the 2, you've got Gallinari at the 4, Capella at the 5, and then obviously Trae Young at the 1, and you roll from there. But, and this is kind of the biggest point, the bigger point of this video, is where does this leave John Collins? Because the more that you look at this roster, the more that he seems like the guy on the outside looking in for a few reasons. Yes, I understand that he's young and he fits the timeline of most of this roster better than someone like Danilo Gallinari, but you have to look at who the team invested in, who the team decided to spend money on, and that player is Danilo Gallinari, and that other player is Bogdan Bogdanovic. To this point, they have not been able to sign John Collins to an extension, and if that was part of the master plan here, I'd have to imagine that we would have heard more buzz about that, other than just the fact that Collins wants a max contract extension. So my further reasoning here is not just who they've invested in, but how the lineup looks, because I'm really hoping that they're not planning on playing Danilo Gallinari at the 3, John Collins at the 4, then you got Bogdanovic, Trae Young, and Capella, because that lineup would be a disaster, like a capital D disaster on the defensive end of the floor. Gallo cannot guard threes anymore. Bogdanovic is okay, but not great. Collins is not a great defender of the 4. We know what Trae Young does. And then, yeah, like Clint Capella can defend the rim a little bit, but he's not going to be able to make up for every single defensive mistake from that group. So that tells me one of two things. Either they just paid a very, very high price for a really good bench player in either Danilo Gallinari or Bogdan Bogdanovic, and they're planning on having someone like DeAndre Hunter or Cam Reddish starting because they need someone on the wing that can defend. Like, imagine they're going up against, Brooklyn, or they're going up against any of the number of teams in the West that have really good wings. Who's guarding Paul George? Who's guarding Kawhi? Who's guarding LeBron? Who's guarding Kevin Durant? Is Danilo Gallinari the given matchup? Probably not. So either there's a lineup thing there and they just paid a ton of money for a sixth man, or John Collins is the odd man out here and they're going to be looking to trade him in advance of his 2021 restricted free agency. Now, not only do I think that this is probably what is going to happen, at least as of right now, but I also think that this is the correct decision. I've talked about this in the past with Collins, where I think that the statistics really overvalue how helpful he actually is for this team. It's not that he's a bad player. He's just not a guy that you want to pay $20+ million to. There's not a ton of perimeter creation there. Yes, he's learning how to shoot off the ball. He's getting better as a perimeter player, but it's always kind of a forced fit for him, where you're forcing him to be an off-ball shooter, where really this guy should be around the rim. And if he's playing the full-time five where he's around the rim all the time, your defense is going to be a dumpster fire. It's just not a great fit unless he is like a six-man type player, and he wants a max contract in Atlanta, so that's clearly not the idea here, in addition to the fact that they just spent a 6th overall pick on a big guy as well. So the front court rotation is suddenly very crowded in Atlanta, and if you're reading all the little tea leaves here about who they're investing in, what kind of lineup they're putting together, and the fact that Danilo Gallinari is so clearly a 4 at this point in his career, not a 3, I think that a John Collins trade is on the horizon, and it would be something that I would recommend. Because if you can move forward with Young, Bogdanovic, Hunter, or whatever wing they go and get, Gallinari, and then Capella, then you've got Onyeka Okongwu off the bench as well. You've got a ton of wings. You've got Herter, you've got Hunter, you've got Cam Reddish if he develops. And you've got the makings of a really nice rotation. Even without John Collins, you can trade him for something. I don't know. I haven't done like a deep dive on where he could go, what kind of assets they could get in return. I'm sure they could get something. And then you go from there with the possibility still existing that if something completely hits the fan in LA or something and they want to trade away Paul George or maybe even a Victor Oladipo trade would potentially be a possibility for Atlanta. That when you go throughout the league, if you can find like a combo 3-4 guy or really good, perimeter wing defender, that would fit really well with this Hawks roster, and they have the assets to make it happen, whether it's with Collins or any number of young players on the bench. And it feels really clear to me like that's the direction that they're planning on going. And I know that there are a lot of Hawks fans that really like John Collins, and they love the chemistry that him and Trae Young have together. But part of me thinks that's just because it's one of the only competent pick and roll partners that Trae Young has had to this point in his career, and he's so good in those situations that it looks really good with him and Collins, but I think it'll still look good with him and Capella, with him and Okongwu. I still think that there's a John Collins trade happening here potentially, just given the moves that they've made, and I think it's the correct move, because I can't imagine that they were in negotiations with Danilo Gallinari. They're like, okay, 3 years, 60+, but you're going to come off the bench behind John Collins. And I know that's been reported, but I just can't imagine that would actually be the case. That's a lot of money to pay to a bench guy, knowing that the starter is a restricted free agent next offseason. I can't imagine a scenario in which they know that Trae Young needs an extension. He's going to be on a bigger deal in 2 years. They've got Capella to a pretty decent sized deal. They've got Bogdanovic and Gallinari to nice deals as well. And they're planning on paying John Collins $20+ a year. That feels like a lot to me for a team that has, yes, more veterans on the roster now, but still haven't proven anything. And that gets closer to a payroll of a team that is proven, that is a top 4 seed in the East, and they haven't shown that to this point. Maybe they show that this year and then they get way more comfortable with the idea of a Collins extension in 2021 and re-signing him in restricted free agency. But for me right now, it seems like the general plan is to, by the trade deadline, at least heavily explore the possibility of trading away John Collins, getting assets for him, and then moving forward from there, maintaining the possibility of a star trade with some of their other younger assets as well, and rolling forward with a core group of Trae Young, Bogdanovic, Gallinari, and Capella at least for the next 2 years, and then you kind of figure it out from there. I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at. I know that a lot of Hawks fans are on a completely different wavelength from that, but that's just what I'm thinking right now about Atlanta after now they've brought in Bogdan Bogdanovic. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.